if OBS resumes its connection. Looks like it did. Yep, we're back online. All right. Your face froze, and I thought either you are not resonating with what I'm saying or something's wrong. So anyway, sorry about that, folks. Okay. Basically, everybody's a co-star to us, and it takes effort
It does.
To get past that kind of innate piece of us. The next thing I was thinking about was the idea of fixing people. You talked about wanting to fix people and move on, and I think ultimately that comes out of impatience.
Yeah,
right.
That's why I said fail to be patient.
Yeah, and I think about there's a song about grief that I've played at church called "Come Close Now," where the idea is grief is you tied to a chair with a house on fire, burning around you, and no matter what anybody says or does, they can't fix your grief. They can't untie you from the chair. They can't tell you what to do. There's just really no shortcut around it. So the only really effective way to address that is to be present with somebody. So compassion can be in the lack of action, but the other than real presence with somebody.
What's helpful for me is to remember being present is doing something.
Correct. Yeah.
You are actually making a difference, and because as we just said a moment ago, it takes effort. That's you are doing something. Yes, it may not be physically doing something, although it can be just actually being with them. But yeah, I think we think that that's not actually helping, but it often is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sometimes, when I'm counseling people, some of the best thing I can just, I'm going to say it in a trite way at this moment for clarity, but it's like, yeah, just saying things like that. Yeah, that's just awful. That's horrible. I don't say it quite like that, but for clarity of what I'm saying, yeah, you just reflecting back to them that I get to some degree the hard thing that they're experiencing.
Yeah. Something as simple as, man, that must be really hard.
Yeah.
Don't tell the story.
No.
Don't try to compare.
We do that. We go, oh, you lost your dad. I lost my dad too. Let me tell you about how it felt for me. Like that. Don't make it about you. Yeah, we do that, don't we?
Yeah, and a lot of that comes out of awareness. I mean, a big chunk of compassion is self-awareness. It's like, how do you kind of press yourself down, submit your own wants or your own need to express yourself for the sake of giving space to another person.
Right.
So anyway, go ahead.
And I struggled how to say that in the sermon. I don't think I did it very well, with words like selfless or not being self-centered, even when self-centered, even as I was trying to summarize it. But it's this idea of, for me, it's just so, because I'm such a visual person, it's the idea of I'm focused on them, and in a sense, I disappear because all I'm thinking about is them. And whatever's happening in my world is irrelevant at that moment.
Yeah.
Does that am I making any sense? I know you understand what I'm trying to communicate because you do this.
I think you're explaining it perfectly well from my perspective.
Okay.
It is so much of what we're saying is the same thing. It's like we have to suppress our own selves to some extent in order to connect compassionately with another person, and that doesn't mean that you go past appropriate boundaries to a point where you are making things difficult for yourself. You talked about somebody being stuck in a pit, and the idea that that telling somebody how to get out or admonishing them for whatever they did to get into that pit, isn't really helpful. Now, if you climb into the pit with them, you do need to make sure that so you can understand their perspective. You do need to have a way to get back out of the pit, right? So that's something that's really important there. Sometimes we do like to wallow in the pit.
You and I both know that that's the case, that there's a lot of people who actually, they like being in the pit, of staying in there. They like the attention they get there, or maybe it's too frightening to get out. I remember, the song we played on Sunday, there was a line in there with the Love is a Hammer song, is that I've worn these clothes for so long that they feel natural.
Yeah.
The pit becomes such a normal place for them that they can't imagine life outside of it. And outside of it would be disturbing to them.
Yeah. Well, here's an example is people who have been incarcerated for a certain period of time will often, when they're released, try to go back.
Right.
They'll find a way to go back to jail because it's hard to be successful when people don't have compassion for you after what you've been through. And it's safer in so many ways to be part of a system that, keeps you locked into one place, right? So those chains, it's like, hey, I'm so used to wearing these things. What would my life be like without it? And
it's terrifying for a lot of us.
Yeah. And so from a compassion perspective, that was one of the other things I wrote, is to kind of acknowledge for yourself, if you were trying to help somebody that wants help, that just because you lift them out of the pit doesn't mean they won't go back to the pit. And that's not a reflection on you and your effectiveness at helping them or anything. And so sometimes you might be helping a person out of the same pit a few times.
True.
And I know in my life that there are people who I've hauled out of the pit a few times, and my sister doesn't watch this, so I'll use my sister as an example. That, somebody will make a mistake, they'll extend themselves financially or whatever, and then they're like, help me. And at some point you're like, the best thing I can do from a compassion perspective is to not help you in the way that you think that I should help you. And it may not be appreciated. Being resented for doing the right thing is tough. So there is the idea of showing compassion by caring so much about somebody that you tell them no.
Yeah, because you can out of compassion or empathy or sympathy or whatever word you want to use, you can help too much to where you actually don't help them. You're just kind of enabling them to stay in the pit. Yeah, and that's knowing the difference is, man, that sometimes it gets really hard to know when you're doing what.
Yeah.
I feel like, and it'd be interesting to hear what you say, but I feel like for a lot of the people who would that hear us, a lot of them, though, that's not the problem. It's more of failing to be patient, or failing to see, especially if it's a circumstance that you really don't understand. I think about people who like struggle with like alcoholism or drug abuse. It's like, I don't have that experience. I really can't get what that means, but I've heard Christians encouraging them how to, why don't you just stop or whatever it is. Like, I don't think you understand what they're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of those things that we talked a little bit about on Sunday, is that we can see, where people may see as Christians a failure to be compassionate is not having the ability to relate or the willingness to relate to why that person might be in the situation they're in. Like you're saying, I don't